This is a technique that I use with the Garmin Etrex GPS. It's a great little unit. It's AA powered. It gives you about 16 hours on a pair of quality AA's. It's easy to carry spares, of course, being AA powered. It's my GPS of choice really, but there are a few things that bug me with it. So what I'm going to show you is how I get around most of those. I'm going to use a few tools to do this. Most of them are free. I've got ribergps.com up on screen at the moment. Route Converter is a free download. You can do everything I want to do in Route Converter with Notepad. I'm going to dip into map source briefly just to show you what you might get on the GPS, but otherwise you wouldn't need that tool. I want to talk a little bit about the problems that I have with the Etrex at the moment. So the first thing is the kind of creative interpretation of the routes that you specify by the unit. If you go into map source and you drag a route out and then you try to plot it on your Etrex, often it'll pick its own version of where you want to go. It'll avoid roads that you're trying to use, and it'll take you the long way around sometimes. The second problem is if you're following a route on a GPS and you know where you want to go, you still end up being a slave to the GPS. It's constantly beeping and chirping at you, and a lot of those instructions are things like bear right on the A207 when you're actually already on the A207, and the left turn it's trying to get you to avoid was laid down by milkmaids in the 1800s, and no one's ever gone down there since. So that's a major problem I have with it. I end up kind of being a slave to the GPS. Additionally, you can end up with out-of-date or unavailable mapping. If you're sharing your routes particularly, you might find that your friend has got a different handset with a slightly different engine in terms of how those routes are generated, or even just a different version of a map, and then the GPSs will disagree on the way to take that route. So what I learned to do to avoid these issues was create a set of turn instructions as waypoints, and then string them together into a route afterwards. And that avoids a lot of these issues, and you'll see that quite often with Audaxes will do that. But the problem is you end up with a GPS that's got hundreds of waypoints on it, and many of which aren't actually relevant to the ride you're trying to complete. So no more intro. Here's how I do it. So I'll start off with ride with GPS. I'm going to add a new ride just from scratch. And for simplicity, I'm just going to put one from roughly my house I'll do part of my commute. So I end up, it's a very good question, where do I end up? I end up over here somewhere. Let me zoom out a little bit. I end up over here. So Riber GPS will string those together for me. And that's not the way I actually want to go. You can see the hill it's drawn in here. I've got a big climb up to the start, but I've got to do that anyway. I've got this long descent, but it's just over 4 miles there, so I'm going to just correct this route, go the way I'd prefer to go, which is over here. Okay, that's 3.5 miles, so it's a little bit shorter. I've still got that first hill, but everything after that's downhill. I've got this little bump here. I'll live with that. That's fine. So I'm happy with this. What I'm going to do is get this onto my unit. So I save the route. I'm just going to call this temp for now for myself, and I'll make it private for me, and I can now view and export that, and I'm going to choose to bring this one out as a route, and here this is temp GPX. So let me pick up my route converter program, and I'm going to open that file into my downloads, and here is the file I'm going to pick up, temp GPX. And you'll see it's handily named these things for me. So I've got left, rights, and a set of straights, and left and rights again. Now the beauty of Street View is that you can double check some of those. So I'm going to come in here and have a look at this item that it said was going to be straight. I'm going to drag myself on there and have a little look at that and make sure it is actually a straight. And as I suspected, it's a roundabout. So that's fine, I can just count the exits. I'll zoom in a little bit. Here we go, that's going to be exit 3. Okay, so back over to my route converter. Let's get in and get this thing right. So the notation I use is based around the Audaxes notation. So at the start here, I'm going to put a new route point in, sorry, and I'll put it here, and I'm going to call that one start, and I'll put that there. Okay, start. This left, well that's actually left at a crossroads, so I'm going to write left at X. This right is right at traffic lights, and again you can use Street View to zoom in there and check those junctions. Let's have a look at the straight. That's fine, so my next instruction I'm fine with that. And the idea is you add these instructions whenever you cross the white line. If you're not sure where the white line is, you go into Street View, you have a look, or you go into Satellite View of Google Maps and you have a look. So this instance, this is actually exit 3 at this roundabout. So I'm going to say exit 3, and let's have a look here. That's straight. That happens to be a crossroads. So straight over crossroads. Sorry. And down here, straight. Well, you wouldn't do anything else there. That's fine. I'm going to take that one out. And this left. Yep, that's fine. I would take a left there. And that looks a left at a T-junction. And then it's got right and right. Well, that's not really what I do there. This is a roundabout if you look at it, so I'm going to make this instead. I'm going to move this waypoint back here, drop in the road a little bit earlier, and say exit 2, and that is in fact a right. So that's right at traffic lights. And I'm going to add a new point, which is the station I passed, and let's say I'm going to end up here. And I'm going to call that finish. Now I tend to, for ease, I tend to number those things, and you can do that quite quickly inside the route converter tool itself. Again, if you don't want to, if you don't have access to the download, it is a free download. If you don't have access to this, you can do this in Notepad as long as you understand how the file works. If you're going to do it to a GPX track. So at this point, I've got my, I've got a set of instructions that I could navigate that would get me there. Okay, and I'm going to save this as a route. Now the difference between doing that in the route converter and doing it inside MapSource is that I can name these coordinates the way I want to, whereas MapSource will force me to name them whatever it thinks is suitable. So let me just save this one, and I'm going to call it, I'll call it demonstration 1, and then in here I'm going to open that up just to show you what we've actually got. Demonstration 1, so I've got a route. You'll see I've got no waypoints, I've got nothing in my track, but I've got a route. When I go into that route, it's got a list of instructions that are going to get me through that route. Now at that point I tend to go back and do the same thing then with the track, so I can compare the two. So I'm just going to drop back in again over to here, and I'm going to export it this time as a GPX track, and let me open up that track. I'm going to copy it from here and I'll paste it on here. So I've now got a single file with the route and the track. So if I transfer this to my GPS, what I've got is no waypoints, and you may want to add a waypoint at the start and at the end, but normally I just write them like this. I've got one track and I've got one route with a set of via points on it. I set the GPS to show the track that I'm going to be following, and I tell it to navigate the route using off-road routing, which means it'll only ever wake up and tell me where to go when I hit one of these waypoints. So when I start the journey from my house, when I ride down here, it's going to ding up here that I need to go left at the crossroads. It's going to go completely silent until I make a right turn here. It's going to completely ignore this straight over. It's going to ignore this merge. It's going to ignore all of these turnings until I get to this one where it's going to tell me I need to take exit 3. Okay, and the beauty of this is that it stays out of your way. It only wakes up when you need to do something. If you find you've got, if you're using the pointer to the next waypoint and you find that the arrow is facing anywhere other than forwards, then you know you've probably gone wrong, and you can always flip across to the track view and check you are on that track. But otherwise, I tend to run the GPS just showing the pointer and the distance to my destination and the distance to the next route point and the name of the next route point, and that means on a single screen I can see that I've got no turns for 3 miles. The turn I've got coming up is going to be at a roundabout. It's not something I'm going to miss. I know roughly where it is. It's going to beep when I get there. If the backlight is set up, it's going to turn on when I'm 15 seconds away from that. It's going to turn off again when I've gone past that junction. I'm going to have just enough time to see that the next instruction is however many miles away and to know what it is. And there's a lot of safety in riding along and knowing that your turn is 10 miles away and it's at traffic lights. It means that you can completely relax and enjoy the ride and enjoy the countryside and not get distracted by following this kind of GPS that's constantly beeping at you. So what does it give you? Well, it gives you a clean GPS. You end up with no waypoints on it other than ones you really want to use. It gives you turn-by-turn instructions even if you haven't got mapping. If your maps are wildly out of date or you don't have any map for the area, you can still follow the track and see if you're on it, and you can still aim for the next waypoint. And when you're following those white lines at the edge of the road, when you cross one, that's when the GPS is going to beep up at you and tell you which way to go. You get interrupted when it matters. It'll beep and the backlight will come on, as I say, but otherwise it's going to stay silent, which means you're not going to use any battery. You're not going to use much battery. You're not watching a scrolling map. You're not zooming in and out trying to work out which way to go at junctions. You can just sort of settle into your pace and really begin to enjoy the ride. So that's how I do it. I'm sure there are a million other ways of doing things. But this is how I navigate using Audax style routing on a Garmin Etrex GPS.